The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello there and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jamison RABBITT, and this week I'm sitting here all by myself, but I brought along a bunch of movies to talk about, so you and I can have a fun movie conversation with some really interesting movies that we have on the marquee and streaming this week. Also have a really fun throwback movie to talk to you about this week. So in lieu of a conversation with a co-host that doesn't exist, I'm going to get started with what we have on the marquee, and it is one of the big movies of this spring movie season. It is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Director James Gunn is back, and he is bringing along the third volume of this massive franchise within the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, this team has been through a lot as we find them here. And we find the Guardians kind of at their worst point. The film opens with Rocket Raccoon playing a haunting version of Radiohead's Creep, this acoustic version of Creep, and it really sets the tone for a melancholy film. And I'm going to try and review this without any real spoilers. Peter Quill, of course, Chris Pratt's character, is moping around, drinking himself half to death as he mourns the loss of his love, Gamora. Of course, you had to have seen everything leading up to this to follow all of the threads that are being laid out here. But and the team is it's at a rough point. Meanwhile, we have our newest villain, the High Evolutionary, played by Chukwudi Iwuji. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but Chukwudi Iwuji is someone from Rocket's past whose goal is to create a new Earth that is perfect. And he's planning on doing that through genetic engineering of animals. He's kind of poorly explained as a villain, but we see that a lot of times with Marvel villains, that they're kind of poorly explained. So we get a lot of flashbacks of he and a very young Rocket Raccoon. And then we cut to modern day, of course. We see him kind of screaming at subordinates to get him what he wants. We see him in those flashbacks where he's torturing animals in so many horrible ways, and then killing them when his experiments don't work. It's kind of rough. And he's to me, he kind of felt like a hopped up version of Sid from Toy Story, with a weird skin mask on, and he's creating his own little island of Dr. Moreau of these hybrid animal creations that he was making. Kind of some disturbing stuff. Meanwhile, you also have Adam Warlock, who we see in the trailer there, played by Will Poulter, who comes roaring into the scene very early on in the film. In the first scene, he comes showing up. And if you remember him, he kind of got introduced at the end of a previous film. And he proves to be too much for this team of Guardians. And because of his attack on the Guardians, Rocket is removed from the fight for most of the film. We don't have Rocket with the team. After this attack, Peter must rally the team to, of course, once again, save the galaxy in one way or another. But this time it's not so easy and it's not so fun. And this team is really at odds with each other. Lots of bickering back and forth, name calling, a lot of infighting amongst all of them. They've gone through the ringer of everything that happened with the Avengers and all that stuff. And you know, I don't want to get too much into the story of the plot, I guess, of what happens with them. But it's a different type of Guardians film to me, and there's a strong focus on Rocket's torturous backstory, and that was kind of hard. And I understand why James Gunn wanted to do this and tell this backstory of Rocket and the moral of how we treat animals and experiment on animals and such. I kind of felt that this should have been done in an earlier film than to give a backstory this late in the game. But here's my struggles with this movie. I took my daughter to it, my 10-year-old daughter, to this film. And I look forward to this quite a bit. My daughter looks forward to these films. They're fun. The Guardians films, I think, are the most fun, lighthearted, comedic films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And they've built this family, and this it's about family and friends. And in a universe where you have Thor dealing with cancer stuff and all this other stuff, Guardians has been the one kind of respite from the doldrums of recent Marvel movies. And this movie comes in super serious. The characters you're in love with, that you love, are in pain. They're hurting. Some are really spiteful. Some are alcoholics. And it made for a tough watch at times. And you've made this a franchise that's aimed at kids. I mean, you market it to kids. Baby Groot and Rocket and all these. You market it to a younger crowd, made 2 fun family action flicks, and made a goofy Christmas special with Kevin Bacon in it last year. And then you come in hard with the message of how we torture animals, and you show a lot of animal torture and things like this. And my poor daughter's over there sobbing through a good chunk of this movie. And so I kind of struggle with my thoughts on this movie. There's a lot that I really enjoy. Chris Pratt, I think, is great. He's at his best as a comedic actor. But one of my problems was they took one of his main foils away when they removed Rocket Raccoon from the majority of this film. One of Star-Lord's main foils who kind of pushes back on him that is super sarcastic was Rocket, and that we lose that dynamic for the majority of the movie. And we made Peter Quill sad and melancholy, and that energy kind of drove the majority of this film as he was melancholy over Gamora. One of the other things that I love about these films is the playlist soundtrack. I feel like the first Guardians was one of the first to create that playlist soundtrack where you're hearing the music that the characters are hearing. And this one, it didn't jive with me. It didn't correspond like the previous films where the music corresponded to what was going on. This one felt to me more like someone had a cool playlist and were just kind of randomly playing songs, and they didn't always correspond to what was going on in the movie. The needle drops just didn't work for everything. And I get, at the end of the movie, I've done a lot of thinking about this, that the drama with Rocket Raccoon paid off at the end, and where his character ended, and where he got to, and how that journey was necessary to a point, but it felt really heavy to me. It felt a little overdone in how we got there. And it separated one of the strongest characters away from the group for most of the film, and what is most likely, no spoilers here, probably the last time we're going to have this group together, and to kind of split the group away. It was kind of frustrating. So part of me really appreciates them going for this big swing in this movie and really working the emotions. I mean, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. The dad in me struggled with this movie. There are great moments in here, though, that really remind me of why I love these films and why I'd love another one despite all this. When Drax and Mantis have their moments together, it's great. They're so much fun. Peter Quill is so much fun. There's some really fun moments in here that you have a big smile on your face. But to me, this felt more like a letdown, and at least is kind of my least favorite of this franchise. From what I'm seeing and discussions I'm having, I think I'm an outlier in this. A lot of people really love this movie, and maybe I will on rewatch, but yeah, I had some struggles with this. It's still better than anything else that Marvel's put out in recent years. It's been a really rough patch, and so this is still better than all that. I think expectations versus what I end up getting is where my separation lies. And so I end up giving Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 3 stars. It's enjoyable. It's fun. It's 2.5 hours. But there's some really hard moments in there. So just beware if you're taking the little ones. The next movie I have on the marquee is a film called Sisu from director Jamari Helander. This is a really interesting film. We find out, I didn't know what Sisu meant. We find out that Sisu is a made-up word that describes extreme courage and determination. And this film is set in the Finnish Lapland during World War II. It follows a gold prospector played by Jorma Tommila. He hits pay dirt just as the Nazis are invading Finland, and he wants nothing to do with this war. He just wants to pan for gold, mine for gold. He wants to be left alone with his horse and his dog, get his gold, and go home. But of course, it's never that easy when you're dealing with Nazis because they just can't leave well enough alone. And this film is broken up into several chapters, punctuated with big, pulpy titles, letting you know what is about to happen. You have titles such as The Gold, The Nazis, The Minefield, The Legend, Scorched Earth, and Kill 'Em All. So you know where this is going. Upon his first interaction with the Nazis, who discover he has gold the size of a fist, 7 Nazis are killed in brutal fashion, several of them thanks to his pickaxe. And this film becomes a silent, violent kill fest, with this silent man almost comedically killing Nazis who often explode like balloons of red paint, while he himself is invincible. He's kind of the main Nazi that's chasing after him is a man named Bruno, played by Axel Hennie, who's this tank commander who just wants the gold, even though word comes out that this man is a legend. He became a legend by killing over 300 Russians in the Winter War. And, of course, he's invincible. We aren't given much else about him or his backstory. He feels like Old Man Rambo, who's capable of killing Nazis in gory underwater fights in minefields and all across this land. And he seemingly doesn't seem to feel pain. And his motivation simply is he wants to keep his gold. And the violence gets more and more ridiculous. And it's fun, like Rambo or the Expendables movies, or in recent years we had a lot of zombie Nazi movies like Overlord and Dead Snow. Had a lot of remembrances to that. And in my screening of it, it was a fairly full house, and the crowd was gasping and laughing because it is over-the-top violence. Ridiculous gory violence, more blood than a human body can hold every time someone gets killed. And so I know I just said that there was a lot of disturbing stuff in the previous film. This is probably more, it's cartoonish violence is what it is. And it's fun. And our main character, doesn't say anything until the last 30 seconds of the film. He's just very, very quiet and very vengeful. And it feels like some of those great over-the-top action movies that I enjoy, like those early Expendables movies and such. So Sisu is currently playing in theaters, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it's not groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's fun, gory action, and I end up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. See how expectations versus delivery can change your opinions, even though the scores are the same. It's just how it works sometimes. Let's move to our streaming spotlight, though. We have a couple this week, and first, I believe they're both on Hulu, but the first one we're going to start with is a new film called Quasi from director Kevin Heffernan, and stars, it's all from the Broken Lizard gang, who you know from Super Troopers and Beer Fest and other films. Follows a hunchback named Quasi. You know him, Quasimodo. He's played in this film by Steve Lemmy of the Broken Lizard gang. And he's desperate for love, but that could never be because he's a hunchback in medieval times. But he finds himself caught up in a murderous plot between the Pope and the King of France. Both want Quasi to murder the other one so that they can take all-consuming power of the kingdom. They're always fighting over who's trumps who. Is the Pope over the King or the King over the Pope? And so the decision is secretly they both like, well, we got to kill the other guy. We'll have this hunchback do it, and then we can just pin it on him, and it'll be so easy. And it's lots of middle-aged jokes, like medieval times jokes that you've mostly seen before. Possibly the most overdone and easy to target era, I think, of human history for parodies. We've seen it done over and over and over again. And jokes about hygiene and social structure and punishments and the treatment of women and usual fare. But it's really low on the jokes is the problem with this movie. Is you've seen movies like this before, and this movie just doesn't deliver a high rate of jokes. And even when it does, it repeats them repeatedly. Jokes about how this is supposed to be set in France, but of course no one's doing a French accent, and the joke is, well, some words sound funny when you say them kind of in a French accent, and we'll do that a bunch of times, just random words. Oh, isn't that funny? That sounds weird, is French. That's not a joke, especially not the 30th time. You also, using the torture rack as a source of comedy has been done for probably 50 years at this point. That went over, as you would expect. Lots of chants about oysters throughout this movie. Oysters becomes a running bit for some reason. Talks about hunchbacks without really making any jokes. And Quasi, as a character, is someone who, when we meet him, is openly bullied by everyone in the town because he's a hunchback and he's come to just accept being bullied. That's my lot in life. But quickly, he becomes like a cult figure for no reason, really. And suddenly, everyone's rejoicing him, except for his friend Duchamp, who's played by the director, Kevin Heffernan, who kind of has a jealousy because he thinks he's, I guess, Quasi was the only guy below him on the social structure. And, it's really, most of it seems just ridiculous. Of course, as he becomes a cult figure, he becomes entangled with the Queen of France. Of course, she falls for him for no reason. And unfortunately, this was really boring, really unfunny movie. Most of it also seemed like it was shot because it takes place like some stuff in caves, inside the castles. A lot of it seemed like it was shot and lit using a flashlight. It was really hard to see things. And it's a classic story of Quasimodo. Steve Lemmy, who stars as Quasi, seems to be trying to really channel Adam Sandler's Little Nicky character in this role, which is one of my least favorite things in the world. And he just doesn't do anything. And it's obviously really heavily influenced by things such as, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and maybe some lesser Mel Brooks, like maybe the most recent History of the World series. But it's really a grade school interpretation of those types of humor. And these are guys that provided us with some really great comedies, some of the best comedies of the new millennium with, the original Super Troopers, Beer Fest, great movies. But have really struggled in recent years, with some really bad retreads. And I'll point to Super Troopers 2 as something that really didn't work at all. It was really low on jokes as well. And so it's been a lot of tired comedies from this crew. And I just don't think they've been funny or relevant in quite a long time. And this does not change my opinion. It only enforces it. And so Quasi, I think, was a complete miss. There was no jokes in the jokes, no fun in the funny. And I ended up giving Quasi 1.5 out of 5 stars. Not great. Not great, Bob. I do not recommend rushing to Hulu to watch this. The other film that I have on the streaming spotlight, though, was also from Hulu. It's a film called Rye Lane. It's a dramedy over there from director Rain and Alan Miller. Stars 2 characters, Dom and Yaz. Dom played by David Johnson, Yaz played by Vivian Opara. They're 2 strangers, both at low points in their personal lives, both kind of trying to recover from bad relationships. They're living in South London, bad breakups, dealing with employment fears, and just really trying to recover from setbacks early in this film when we meet them. The film takes place over the course of one day as these 2 go from strangers who meet in a unisex restroom at a really odd meet cute to 2 people who bond and support each other. Dom is really tortured over his ex. He caught her cheating on him with his best friend, but he can't get past her. Even though they've broken up and now she's with his best friend and they're very open about it, he can't get past it. And nor can he stand up to his friend for betraying him. He kind of is like suddenly an odd third wheel in their relationship. And it's because he's so timid, he can't really stand up for himself. Yaz, meanwhile, has her own relationship issues. She also has a fear of chasing her career dream of becoming a costume designer. And where Dom is very meek and awkward, Yaz is more bold and adventurous outwardly. She steps in with his healing with his ex, and this spark is made between the 2 of them. And you probably know where this is going. But the film becomes a really fun, light rom-com with 2 people who are opposite to those... The people around them see them as opposites, but really inside, within their hearts, they're very similar. And they push each other outside of their comfort zones. And I really love, especially as they're recounting how their backstories of trauma and heartache, it's shown as stage plays, where they're narrating these stage plays and acting it out to show you how things went down, how things fell apart in their previous relationships. And it's just really fun direction, some really fun editing and how they put that together. And I like that Yaz's breakup, her tragedy, her trauma, involves one of my favorite groups, A Tribe Called Quest. And A Tribe Called Quest album sets up the big moment in the third act of this film. And I enjoyed how they kind of made that, how they tied all that in. There's this hilarious, really embarrassing part with Dom, as his true musical tastes are revealed and exposed at this barbecue where with Yaz's family. He's trying to impress everybody, especially her uncle. He's trying to impress him with his musical knowledge and tastes, and then it's revealed that he's much different than what he claims to be. And the film looks great. It's only an hour, 22 minutes. I mean, it's barely a film. And it made me laugh out loud. I love some of the editing choices in this movie. And a great cameo from Colin Firth in this movie out of nowhere. Just because they're in South London, they're like, hey, Colin. I don't understand the connection to him in this movie, but he plays a character who's running a food stand called Love Guacamole. It's a guacamole stand. Because, of course, he was one of the stars of Love Actually. It's so random, and it just made me enjoy that. And it's, the film itself is totally standard fare as far as the story goes. If you've seen any rom-coms, you've seen When Harry Met Sally or any of these, the highs and lows that this is going to go through, the pitfalls they're going to fall into. But I felt they delivered on it really well, and it was fun. The characters were enjoyable. And I ended up giving Rye Lane a really solid 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, standard rom-com, but it's really fun, and I enjoyed the 2 leads in this one. So check that out over on Hulu if it sounds interesting to you. The last film I have to talk to you about this week is our movie throwback. And I'll tell you what, I've been watching a ton of Nicolas Cage movies over the last week for various reasons. I think I've mentioned in here a few other times that Real Reviews hosts a Facebook group to talk about movies called Movie Mojo Maniacs. We talk about movies. We do like March Madness brackets with actors and movies and such. And recently, Nick Cage has been the hot topic in there and trying to decide what his best movie was, and arguments going on and this and that. And so Nick Cage has been on the brain for me. So I have found myself watching a lot of Nick Cage movies as I try to decide what I love the most from him. And so one of them really stood out to me because I had not seen it in 25 years probably, and was reminded how great he is in this. And I'm talking about 1995's Leaving Las Vegas from director Mike Figgis. Really, for the most part, a two-hander. I mean, we have other people in here, but it's Nicolas Cage as Ben and Elizabeth Shue as Sarah with an E. And no one else really matters in this film. Ben, his alcoholism is killing him, and he is not trying to slow that death down in any way. He goes to Las Vegas to really drink himself to death, hires an escort to be with him, but really just to talk to him. And Sarah is that escort. He doesn't want anything other than her to talk with him. And they form this pact where she will never ask him to stop drinking, and he will never ask her to stop turning tricks. And of course, along the way to his death, they fall in love. And it's not an easy love because he's a mess. And she has a pimp who's abusive to her. And they're two very broken people who want to save the other person more than they want to save themselves. And it's a real Greek tragedy about loneliness and what unconditional love truly is. And it's a beautiful, heartbreaking film. Both leads are incredible in this movie. Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue have great chemistry together in this. It's shot beautifully. It's his character of Ben has so much depth to him. Actually, both of them do, because at first you think, why would these two people get together? Why? What would she see in this guy who is a fall down, blackout, drunk alcoholic? But she sees a broken soul, much as she is, and the movie takes you on a real journey. And it's perhaps Nicolas Cage's best performance. I mean, it was his only Best Actor win. Elizabeth Shue was nominated, as was director Mike Figgis for direction and writing. Elizabeth Shue lost this year to Susan Sarandon for Dead Man Walking. And rewatching this now, I haven't rewatched Dead Man Walking probably in 25 years as well. Man, I got done with this. I said, I can't believe she didn't win for this because she was phenomenal. And of course, this is the year that Marissa Tomei won Best Supporting Actress. It was an odd year at the Oscars, for sure. But it's for Nicolas Cage, a really grounded performance from an actor who is rarely grounded. But, you have to look back and realize that the Nicolas Cage that we get these days, the out-of-control guy, was a phenomenal actor early on. And I don't know where this ranks for me in his filmography as a film, but it's a film that on rewatch really had me tied up in knots, story-wise, performance-wise, everything. And this was back in a time, 1995, this was a time when he was only making 2 movies a year, as opposed to the 7, sometimes 8 movies a year he's making now. He's just churning out anything. He'll just, whatever, I'll make it. This was a time when he was really being thoughtful about the roles, and was still trying to make his name, right? And it was after this and the Academy Award win, he followed this movie up. Get this, his next 4 films after this were The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, and City of Angels. 4 phenomenal movies that really launched his star into the stratosphere and probably spun him off orbit a little bit. But, a great career there in the mid to late 90s. And, this is a guy who now is willing to make anything. But I really enjoy this film. Leaving Las Vegas is one that if you haven't seen in a while or have never seen, I definitely recommend you checking it out. It's streaming over on several streaming services right now. I can't remember which one I found it on, but it was available on multiple services. So watch a great movie with great performances. Enjoy it and have some fun with that. All right, the last thing we have, well, not the last thing, but let's take a look ahead at what is coming soon. The weekend of May 19th I'm looking at, and we have a few films. In theaters that week we have, it's another big movie. It's Fast X, the 10th film in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Jason Momoa joins this one as our villain, who will probably become friends with everyone at the end because that's how everything works in these movies. But Fast X is coming racing to a theater near you. Make sure you're getting your tickets for that. We also have in theaters Master Gardener, the newest film from Paul Schrader, starring Joel Edgerton and Sigourney Weaver. I'm a huge Paul Schrader fan. Joel Edgerton is the titular Master Gardener. Weird things are going to happen, I can guarantee it. That's going to be in limited release the weekend of May 19th. Over on our streaming platforms, we have White Men Can't Jump, a remake of the 1992 film, recast with Cinqua Walls and Jack Harlow. And then lastly, a film called Land of Gold, about a truck driver who discovers a young Mexican-American girl in his shipping container, and he has to take her on an arduous journey to reunite her with her family. Those are all the films coming out the weekend of May 19th. Of course, before we move any further, we have to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theater, the Palace here in Sun Prairie. We are so blessed to have such a wonderful theater right here in our community, and they have been so supportive of this program through the years, and we appreciate that. I love giving shout-outs to the folks over there. Alice, the first face you see when you walk into the Palace, she's there at the ticket counter. Go and see what color hair she's got, but it's always a smile and a great conversation with her. I always enjoy it, so go say hi to her. Give her a thumbs up. Say, hey, I heard you on Real Reviews. Next week, I'm going to be talking about some wild films. I've got Book Club, the next chapter. I still have to watch the first one. I never saw the original, so I've got to catch up on that because I don't want to be lost in this. We also have Charlie Day's Fool's Paradise, the film that he wrote, directed, and is starring in. I also have Jennifer Lopez in The Mother. Possibly the new Ben Affleck film, Hypnotic. But more importantly, I'm going to be joined by Dan Presser. That's the award-winning Dan Presser, the host of Sun Prairie News. I'm very excited. We haven't had him on for quite a while. So looking forward to that. I think the last time he was on, we were talking about movies we were looking forward to this year. So you want to stay tuned for that next week. But until that time, I want to thank you for joining me and remind you to stick around for other great programming. And until next week, thanks for watching.